about that time to talk about the magic. Sit back, relax, and grab a Dole Whip. It's time to start talking all things Disney. And now, here's your host, Joseph Ballesteros.
Hello, Magic Cheers. Welcome to another episode of Talk About the Magic. It's D23 still. I know it's weird because D23 was 2 weeks ago now, but there's just so much stuff to talk about. So last week we had Serena, who we kind of focused on Disney World and the announcements that was happening there. This week I am very excited to bring on a wonderful guest who also has been on the show in the past. You might call her Jessica. I call her the Duchess, and I'm very excited that she's joining us today. Jessica, would you please say hello to the Magic Cheers?
Hi, everybody. It's great to be back. I'm excited to talk about D23.
Yeah, so the reason why we have Jessica on today is because she is actually one of the few websites that very much focuses on one part. And she focuses on Disneyland quite a bit there. And so she's definitely someone who I trust when it comes to asking questions or what to be expecting, because a lot of the reason why D23 is important, especially this the park talk obviously, is because that affects your trips. It's funny because I can only imagine how upset some people might be that they have scheduled a fast pass for August 14th for the Great Movie Ride, and that's gone now. So many changes D23 brings. So today we're going to be talking D23, but with the aspect of Disneyland, the changes coming there, the announcements that were made for there, and kind of get some information from Jessica as far as what we should be looking forward to, and also to get her opinion whether she was excited about the news or she was like meh. So let's get started then with today's topic, Jessica. So D23, first off, I mean, being that you're there and everything, and D23 happens, is that something you get excited about, or is it just more like, oh, so many people are going to come from out of town for this thing?
It's a stress fest.
Okay.
I live in Northern California now, but I was in Southern California for a few years, and I have to say it was definitely a weekend where I would avoid the resort at all costs, because you can get your news pretty much right when it happens anyway. So yeah. I'm not a person that's willing to get up at 3 a.m. and wait in line to get into a panel, so was not for me.
seeing those people line up like that too, I was like, and I had seen so many reports where they were saying like Disney was not actually allowing that to happen, but still people found a way. They wanted to camp. They stayed out there. So I can only imagine, because that's what I always think about too. Like when for here in San Antonio we have Fiesta, and Fiesta, all of a sudden, while it's fun for a lot of people, if you live here, for a lot of the people who live here, it's the one time we avoid going downtown, because it truly is just like shoulder to shoulder, steaming hot, and it's not as fun as if you're a visitor, obviously. So that's why I brought that up, because I'm like, I can only imagine those poor people who are in California who are like, oh no, D23 is coming, we're not doing nothing this entire weekend.
Yeah, and it always falls on a heat wave, no matter what. So it's it's not that long of a walk from the convention center to the park gates, but when it's 100 degrees, it feels endless. So I feel very sorry for those people.
So with D23 and Disneyland and all the news happening, I mean, have you been able to visit the park since even the latest edition with Guardians of the Galaxy?
I have, but it was very shortly after it opened, and the lines were still 5 hours. So I'm waiting until my next trip to actually go on it. But I've seen it in person. Yeah,
I could only. Yeah, I mean, we went to Disney World when we were trying to get onto Frozen, and it was like a 2-hour wait, and then it broke down. So yeah. But the good thing is
that's fun.
Yeah, I know. And the good thing though is it didn't seem like any issues like that were happening there. Just but yeah, definitely the lines were crazy long. But with the changes that, like I said, that are coming to Disneyland, I feel like obviously Disneyland is taking a page from Disney World book. They are trying to expand. They are trying to grow. They want to make Disneyland a destination that you don't say, well, we'll go to Disneyland and do other things in California. They want it to be we'll go to Disneyland and then California Adventures And really, that's going to take your 4 days or maybe even 5 days, potentially, with everything they're bringing to there. So let's get into some of the announcements. What were some of the announcements that really kind of stuck out to you?
Well, I think the one that stuck out to everyone would probably be Pixar Fest and Pixar Pier. That certainly generated the strongest reactions. And because a lot of the stuff, honestly, we kind of already knew or suspected. Like Star Wars Land, everybody already knew that was coming. So the announcements were just kind of cool added details, but the shock wasn't really there. Mm-hmm. And then with Marvel Land, as soon as Guardians of the Galaxy opened up, everyone thought that was inevitable. So really the big thing was Pixar Pier and Pixar Fest.
Yeah, I think those were definitely things that people, like you said, I mean, a lot of stuff we kind of already had an idea, even if it was just through rumors, we kind of had an idea. But those two were definitely kind of a surprise. What's funny to me too is I think what Disney's doing is very smart, especially with what they did with the Avengers hatch there, because what they're doing is they're buying time, right? They're saying, look, we put this here to kind of create a mystique, create people guessing and questioning, but it also gives them time to actually build something behind it, whether it takes 2 or 3 years to actually do that. We know that they're working, of course, a lot with Marvel because they own it, but bringing that into the parks. What do you think, because here's something that interests me, and maybe I should have saved this question for last, but I'll just do it now. What kind of impact do you think all of these new kind of IPs coming in, Marvel, Star Wars, even Toy Story, even though that is still part, it's technically Pixar, but it is part of Disney because they're under the family. But what do you think about all of these kind of, outer additions coming into Disneyland? How do you think that's going to affect the feel of what Disneyland is?
That's a really good question, and it's one that Disneyland has not dealt with the same way that I think Disney World has with a lot of this stuff, because so much of what we have is kind of just old, so we're used to it. It's not a park where we're used to growing pains, and that's definitely what we're going through right now, especially with California Adventure. It's a teenage park, people have been saying, because it's 16 years old, so it's trying to figure out what it is and what it wants to be. I think that it's the park, California Adventure specifically, has already really deviated from its original intent, which was a grand tour of California. And I think that's okay, because it didn't necessarily resonate in the same way as Disneyland did, because it didn't have the characters and the stories in the same way. And that's what people want. That's why people go to a Disney park. I think that the challenge they have is making it feel natural and cohesive and not like a mishmash of random franchises, because then it feels more like Universal. Mm-hmm. So I think with Pixar Pier specifically, the name really bothers me, because for anyone that's been to Disneyland and has been on Paradise Pier, there's plenty of open space in the back. There's just some weird shops and arcades, and that's the perfect place to add a lot of Pixar stuff. But changing the name to Pixar Pier kind of feels forced, and it's not really cohesive with the rest of the area when the neighboring lands are called Pacific Wharf and Grizzly Peak and all this stuff. And sure, there's Cars Land, but that is distinctive from the rest. So I think that Disney is kind of teetering the line right now between how can we bring more characters and kind of bring that magic that people feel across the street at Disneyland, but at the same time, it also kind of feels like it's a lot at once. Yeah. So maybe it's just us West Coasters being sensitive to the fact that we haven't had a lot of dramatic, you have to take this now. Yeah. So I don't know if the East Coasters are laughing at us or something, but that's what we're struggling with right now.
Oh, I think it's interesting. Because, like, for me personally, I've never been, but it's interesting because I now know the likelihood of me seeing, how it was prior to Pixar Pier is very slim, and that's kind of also sad because I'm like, I'm not going to know a part of history in that way of that's been there for so long. And what's funny too is how you mentioned it, and it kind of brings me into like World Showcase. It's like if they were to just throw, they are kind of doing that with Frozen and now bringing Ratatouille, but they go in there. But it's like if they threw in, I don't know, like a Doctor Strange in the middle of the World Showcase pavilion. Like I could see what you're saying as far as it doesn't necessarily mesh well, but of course at the same time it should also kind of bring, not to say red flags in a negative way, but warnings as far as apparently I think Disney will maybe eventually kind of start changing everything in that way, which could be a bummer for people who really enjoy it, like you were saying, especially if you're there, you're used to it, it has the memories that it has for you. But
and the added frustration for, I think, California Disney people, as well as California Adventure, went through a huge, basically redo from 2007 to 2012, where they tore down like half the park and completely rebuilt it. That's when Cars Land came in, Buena Vista Street appeared. So people just got used to it being this new thing and became okay with it. And it sort of feels like you're undoing everything you just did to do something else. So there's nothing you can kind of feel attached to, almost, because you think it's just going to go away. Yeah,
that's true. It hasn't been, 20 years, like you're saying. Like it is still fresh for a lot of people, and so it's very true. And I never thought of it that way. I never heard of it that way. So I think that's a very good way to do it. I mean, it's 16. It's trying to figure out what it wants to be when it grows up. So it's a very good analogy for what's going on right now.
Well, I can't take credit for it because I saw it on Twitter or something, but I really liked it.
Yeah, it's still good for sure. So being also, like, with the announcements, like I said, about with Marvel being added on as well, what do you feel? Because see, to me, this is what's interesting. There's a lot of I wouldn't say like confusion or something, but there's a, like you said, it's kind of trying to figure out what it is. And so we see now that with the Avengers being added to, not the Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy being added to Tower of Terror. And then we see them mentioning that they're going to be bringing in more of the Marvel characters, being that it is California Adventure Park. And again, because I've never been, I'm just curious. Do you think that affects as far as, what to expect when you're heading to Disneyland and to California Adventures? Or, like, you know what I mean? Is the feeling the same when you go to Disneyland and to California Adventures? I guess that's the question I'm trying to ask. Is it the same?
Are you saying, is it the same with Marvel or without Marvel? Is that what you're asking? Like, will Marvel make it feel more the same?
I guess I'm going to ask both because, right now as is, when you go, because again, like for us who haven't been, when you go into Disneyland, from what I've heard, you get this wow feeling. Like, even though even though it technically isn't as big and maybe doesn't have the same rides and all that kind of stuff, it's the one that started it all. So you get this appreciation immediately. And then, again, from what I've heard and understood, Adventure is definitely more, like you were saying, more of a let's get in here, have fun. It's more of a just, not thrill in that sense of, nobody can have fun there unless you're on thrill rides, but it is more of almost a theme parky style experience. With them adding more things into California Adventure, like Marvel and, who else, what else, whatever they're going to add in the future. If they start kind of bleeding that into Disneyland, do you think that would be a negative or kind of a make sense positive style thing? Or do you feel like that's something they should never touch? Like, Disneyland should stay as is as long as it can? Because I know we all say this, but I kind of don't agree in this aspect. When we always mention, Walt always said to look towards the future, Walt always said Disneyland will never be done. And I'm like, yeah, but we're kind of getting, I feel like sometimes we're not also respecting like what has began, what started it kind of deal. And then you lose your roots. Like you were saying, it becomes almost, and not to put the Universal down, but it can become like a Universal thing where it's just like, you're just going to a theme park. Like, right. So do you feel like, are you concerned that it would bleed into Disneyland, all of this that's happening? Are you against, them changing that kind of stuff? Or do you feel like, it's going to happen and we just need to get used to it and prepare ourselves?
Well, no, I think you're asking two really good questions. The first is, does California Adventure need more of what Disneyland has? Because Disneyland arguably has more characters and storytelling. And then the second question is, so should we ever touch Disneyland, or is it fine as it is? And to answer the first question about California Adventure, I think they really do need more. And that was really the point of that first refurbishment and expansion project that they did, because people didn't get it. It was a great theme park, but it wasn't Disney. There was no magic. There was no, immersive storytelling in the same way that there was in Disneyland. And given that Disney can't add Marvel characters to the Orlando park because of a deal with Universal that I don't fully understand, I think that they would be crazy not to put them in California because they have this perfect opportunity to do it. So, and obviously people love Marvel. I love Marvel. Those movies make a ton of money. It's just they're sitting on a gold mine that they're not accessing. So for me, for both Disneyland and California Adventure, I'm not opposed to expansion and growth. What always concerns me is them taking away something that exists that people love for something else. And unfortunately, because Disneyland lacks the space advantage that Orlando has, that happens a lot. It happened with the Tower of Terror, right? So Star Wars Land is coming. That's not really taking much away. It took away this small space called Big Thunder Ranch, but it wasn't a huge deal. And I think that's awesome. I think it'll be a really great addition to the back of the park. It'll help crowd congestion in some of the popular areas now. So I definitely don't oppose growth. I just get scared and upset and frustrated when they take away classic stuff. Because like you said, you have to kind of stay true to your roots because that's the reason people come in the first place. They're not coming to go on exclusively brand new roller coasters because then you could go to literally any theme park anywhere. Right? You're going for that Disney experience. And especially in Disneyland, which has fewer roller coasters and is much more about like that classic feeling and the charm and all the old dark rides. It's really about that feeling and kind of revisiting your childhood almost. So they have to be very careful about not chipping away at that too much, I think.
Yeah, I would that's something that I always think about because like I said, I want to get over to Disneyland and it would be a bummer for me to go and it's like the only thing original here is that one building that Walt started. Everything else is all Marvel. Woo, you know what I mean? Like it's just
right,
like,
yeah.
No.
Then it just feels too generic. It's just like anywhere.
Exactly. So can you go into the parades? Because the parades, I honestly am kind of lost. Disney World, huge fan, of course, of the electric parade there, and then that's gone now. And from what I understand, you guys over at Disneyland pretty much got now 4 parades that are going to be there. Is that correct? Something like 4?
For the time, well, so I'm not sure what the overlap is. That's not been made clear to me. But Main Street Electrical Parade is leaving in about a month, and nobody knows where it's going. So it could come back to you. I don't know. But the nighttime parade that I really love is Paint the Night, and that is coming back. But instead of being in Disneyland, it's going to go into California Adventure. And then right now, Disneyland has a parade called Mickey's Soundsational, which is a daytime parade. And then we're also getting the Pixar Play Parade, which is a daytime parade that was in California Adventure. But I don't know if that means Mickey Soundsational is going away or if it's just they're going to have 2 daytime parades. It's basically just a giant musical chairs over here.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm like, because I know they were doing some swapping and to me, what I would want to know too, again, for anyone who's planning to go to Disneyland or has never been, how. I guess the question I want to ask is because I understand obviously they're 2 different parks, so you're not buying one ticket and you get both parks. You know what I mean? You have to get 2 different parks. How would you say what would you say is important as far as is Disneyland still a full day? Is it something that you can maybe knock out in a day? Is it 2-day? Should you reserve your energy for California Adventures? If let's say you're somebody who does get on all the rides kind of deal. How should you be prepared, as far as physically, like Florida, hot, rain, walk, pretty much 4 parks, and for sure that you're going to try, of course now it's very hard, but back in the day it would be actually now Hollywood studios you could probably knock out in like 3 hours or something.
I know.
Everything is closed there. But,
that's rough. I feel bad about complaining about California Adventure when I look at Hollywood Studios. Yikes.
So it's like, so how would you say prepare, like, for the people who are interested in going? Is it, what kind of, mindset should they be thinking about? Do they need to start training before they get over there? How is it?
Well, obviously it depends a lot on the time of year that you go, because if you're going to go in the middle of July when it's really crowded, you need more time. But then if you go in, say, February when it's much quieter, but generally speaking, for someone that's never been, I would recommend 3 days. And to get park hopper tickets, because for anyone that's never been to Disneyland, the parks are remarkably close together, unlike anything in Disney World. The entrance to the Magic Kingdom, where the lagoon is the gate to California Adventure. They are literally that close. So
no kind of monorail needed in that sense. Like, you can walk if you wanted to.
Yeah, and then downtown Disney is next to them, so everything is walkable. There is a monorail, but it is much more like an attraction than an actual train. So it just takes you to downtown Disney on the other side. It's a walking area for sure, and you don't need to worry about buses or taking the boat or anything like that. It's all in the same space. And I would say that Disneyland is definitely a park that would take a full day, if not more so, to really see everything. But at least in the state it's in now, California Adventure, in my opinion, is not. Unless, of course, you don't use any fast passes and you wait in crazy long lines all day. But if you're being smart about fast pass, or you're going to the first place in the morning and trying to, like a typical Disney fan would, I would say, it's like most of a day, but it's really not a full day park. So when people go to the resort, it's pretty common to hop back and forth constantly. I tracked it on my last visit because someone on my podcast actually asked me if they should get a one day one park ticket or a hopper, and I hopped 7 times between the two parks during the day. Wow. Because it's just so easy. So while you're waiting for a fast pass for, say, Space Mountain, you can hop over and go to Monsters Inc. and California Adventure and then go right back, and it doesn't feel like an overwhelming walk. So
yeah, I think that's because that's something that we think about too, because obviously, if it's your first time to either parks, you do hear a lot more stress as far as to prepare when it comes to Disney World. And with Disneyland, that's something I always wondered, because of the fact that yes, they were so close. I always wondered, like, is it worth it, or should you say no? So considering that they're literally all walking distance, and obviously a lot of people necessarily don't always go on every ride. So a lot of them, they kind of focus more on the easygoing rides. So that's really interesting. And then of course, I mean, I don't know if you actually stayed at a resort there or not, but again, that's okay. So that's another question I wanted to bring up with the people who are going or interested in going for the first time, which is, with Disney World, you go usually to the resorts. You get a lot of perks when you stay at the resorts, and then also the benefit, of course, is kind of that transportation and stuff. From what I've heard with Disneyland, it is literally a very, very popular tourist area now because of Disneyland, to where there's hotels across the street, where like you don't even have to worry about that kind of stuff. Would you say, obviously, of course, it comes down to price to an extent, but would you say going to a resort is something that you would really consider over a normal style, more affordable style hotel? Or do you think, honestly, you could probably get away with it? Because Disney World, even if you get a out-of-park kind of hotel, you still need a car to get there, because a lot of them, their transportation finishes like at 8 o'clock at night, and you're like, what? No. So would you consider a resort stay as kind of something that is a beneficial thing, or is it more just experience the magic?
I think that's a tough question. I guess I would say generally, no, it's good. I think overall it's kind of just an added kind of magical thing, because it's really, really expensive compared to hotels that are the same distance away from the park gates that are not Disney hotels. The two main perks that you get is you get access Magic Morning, which is an hour admission earlier than the park actually opens. And then you also get, if you're staying at the Grand Californian, you have a private entrance to California Adventure, which is pretty awesome because I've done that before, but it's just so expensive. It can be 5 times the price of the hotels on Harbor Boulevard. And to give you some idea for anyone listening that has never been, the resort hotels are on the far west side of the property. Then there's downtown Disney. Then there's the park gates, and then there's a street called Harbor Boulevard. And that street has hotels almost the entire way up and down. Pretty inexpensive ones. So if you stay at one of those cheaper hotels and walk to the gates, it would probably take you the exact same amount of time as if you were staying at the Disneyland hotel because of where its location is. So you're not getting any advantage in that sense by staying on property, but you do get stuff like you can, all of the hotels have restaurants that have character breakfasts that you can make reservations for, which of course you can if you're not staying in the hotel as well, but it's a little bit easier. And they have pretty cool grounds. They have amazing pools. So they're just basically fancy hotels. So if you're hoping for a lot of dramatic perks or being closer to the gates, you won't really have that advantage. And the only hotel that has park views, really, despite what they might tell you, is the Grand Californian, because the Disneyland Hotel and Paradise Pier Hotel are just too far away to have a direct view of the park.
Awesome. See, I'm learning so much right now. That's awesome.
Yeah. So if you have to pick a hotel and you're like, okay, I'm going to splurge, do the Grand Californian. It's the best one.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's the most expensive, but it's also the coolest. And the private entrance thing is huge because the private entrance is right across from Grizzly River Run, which is, from what I understand, equivalent to Kali River Rapids in Animal Kingdom. Mm-hmm. And if you get soaked, you can run back up to your room and change and come down in 5 minutes. It's perfect.
That's awesome. Yeah, I because I'm glad you said that, because again, all I go by is, resort videos and stuff, and yeah, like you said, every room is a perfect room to see Disney in. But that's like, yeah, that's because you want me to just go into your resort there, Disney. That's why you're telling me that. But right. that's true. That's true. I'm glad you were able to share that. So let's get into a little bit of what it is you do, though. You are the owner or the website runner or the owner of the website. I don't know how to say the proper term in that way. But
is there a proper term?
I don't know. Yeah, I just realized that. I'm trying to say it, and I'm like, wait, my mind can't think of anything. But Duchess of Disneyland. So let's go into that real quick, because especially like you said, you did move. And last time I spoke to you, you were actually like, what? It seemed almost every weekend kind of deal. You had access, a bit of availability to the parks. And so with you moving and everything, how has Duchess of Disneyland changed? Because I'm looking at it and I can't tell. It looks really great. We still have a lot of Disney stuff, of course, but just in case people aren't aware, what should they be expecting when they visit duchessofdisneyland.com?
Well, yeah, I really don't think that it has changed, and I'm glad that you don't think so either, because that's a good sign.
Okay, good. Because would have been worse if you were like, oh, I've worked very hard on changing it. Okay.
No, the only thing that's different is now when I go, because I don't go as often, I just take 700 times more pictures just so I have enough for until the next time I go. That's the only difference. So Duchess of Disneyland is a website that is supposed to be, it's in part almost like an online encyclopedia of everything you need to know about Disneyland. And then I also try to provide things like tips and trivia and park history, because I couldn't find a website for Disneyland that had everything in one place. There are some amazing websites that talk about park history. There are some amazing sites that give you touring plans, but I kind of wanted one that goes a little deeper. And really the one thing that I would say I have the most fun doing with Duchess of Disneyland is talking about what I call hidden gems, which are really, it kind of fits into the conversation we had before about what sets Disney apart from something like Universal or any other generic theme park. They're the little details that most people would just never notice walking around the park, like a hidden Figaro from Pinocchio in Fantasyland, for example, is one. But I like to highlight those things because I think that when you notice them, you really can appreciate what makes a park like Disneyland so magical, and why it's worth experiencing over and over again, because you can always find something new.
And I think like what you said is what I personally really enjoy the fact, about this website as much, is because it is focused on Disneyland. And like I said, there's a ton of sites out there, and they're focused on different things, but they're usually focused, like my site, for instance, is just focused on Disney in general. But I love how you do focus on, Disneyland. And of course, guys, when you do head over to duchessdisneyland.com, you're going to find a lot of information. But what I like to do, because like what you just said, and it's the amount of work that I know you put into it, Jessica, that's why I really kind of respect this, and I love to read it, which is the Disneyland 101, because you give a lot of information to different parts of Disneyland. And like I said, being that I've never been to the actual Disneyland, getting to click on, a world here, well, I guess they're not, what are they called?
Lands, I call them.
Okay.
I don't know if they have an official. I think that's what it says on the map, which is why I did that.
So lands, I love that, you go into the background, you say, kind of when it started and all that kind of stuff. I personally enjoy that kind of stuff. So guys, be sure to check
Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. It's like I said, especially because I know this isn't something that you did in 25 minutes. Like, this takes time to give that much detail, that much detail and information. So I definitely, I really appreciate that. So guys, be sure, like I said, to check out DuchessofDisneyland.com, and of course, real quick too, if you can give some information regarding the podcast, Dis Explorers, give some more details about that.
Sure, yeah. I joined a podcast about a year ago, and it's not focused on Disneyland. It's just Disney as a whole. And there are 6 of us, which is a lot for one podcast, but we kind of formed as a group because each of us has a different, specialty.
You guys are the Avengers of the Disney podcast, honestly. Y'all each
I'm going to tell them you said that because they're going to love it.
Awesome. Yeah, because y'all each have your own superpower. So I'm sorry I interrupted, but I just wanted
No, please.
Go ahead and share each one of y'all's special abilities there.
Okay, so there is Melanie, who is also a blogger at DCL Prep School. And if you can tell from the name, she knows everything there is to know about the cruise line, which is awesome because I've never been on a cruise, so it's super helpful. And then we have Milford, who blogs at Milford on the Move, and he is kind of unique for us because he's a travel agent, so he gets news first, and he always knows what's coming and where you should go and what date. He can just hook you up with all that stuff. It's awesome. And then we have RJ, who he does not blog, but we call him our resident pirate because he's obsessed with all things Pirates of the Caribbean, and he's a musician, so he kind of takes the lead on editing and managing our podcast, and he knows a lot about soundtracks, and he's just kind of he grew up going to Disney World as well. And that's what I kind of like about this group is even though we each have our specialty, we all have things in common. And then the other 2 girls, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was actually disagreeing with you.
Oh, okay. And then there's Adrian, who blogs at wdwbound.com, and she's been on your podcast before, right?
Yes, she has.
She's a Disney World blogger. And then we have Crystal, who doesn't blog, but she is an Orlando local, which is awesome. And she's also a runner, so she knows everything about Run Disney. So, and then there's me, and I do the Disneyland stuff. So we each kind of have our own little specialty in the realm of Disney.
See what I mean? All superpowers. Everybody has their own unique ability. They all came together. Oh, that's awesome. So
yeah, it's fun.
I do want to thank you for coming on today, Jessica. I really had a blast talking with you and talking about, of course, Disney and everything happening there. Like I said, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens there with Disneyland. I think with changes that are coming, I don't think them to be negative, but I definitely could understand a lot of the concern, especially like you just said, we were talking about earlier. I mean, Disney for some reason just really doesn't like to give kind of a warning. Like wishes we got a warning in Disney World. We got a couple months warning, but with Great Movie Ride and Ellen's energy, just for that to go away within I think it was pretty much less than a month because they were August 13th. I mean, it's just come on, give me one more. So I really... Well,
I don't know. Is it like ripping off a Band-Aid where it's less painful, or do you need a long grieving process? I don't know what's better.
That could be true. You know what? Now we're getting psychological, because now we can look at people and say, okay, if you really had an issue with this, it could be because you're one of the... So, yeah, for me personally, yes, I am a rip-off Band-Aid kind of person, so maybe I shouldn't... freak out too bad. But yeah, to me, that's the one issue I do have with Disney when they start doing stuff like this, because I feel come on, you got to give us a little bit more warning in that sense. But I understand why they do what they do, and I think in the end, of course, people end up, not to say forgetting in a negative way, but they forget because Disney does such a great job on the new stuff they bring and kind of help people to refocus on the new stuff. So
and the other thing is they listen. They really do. Yeah. They have all those annoying people that ask you to take surveys 100 times in the park, and if something doesn't work and it's bad, it will go away.
Yeah,
that's just true. It's what happens.
I know.
That's what I try to tell myself.
You know what? That's true. Yeah, I'm gonna from now on. Whenever I see people doing surveys near a ride that I like, I'm gonna make sure to tell everybody else who's filling out a survey, you better say you like this ride. Because I bet you it's exactly what they did. They probably just stood by Ellen's and said, or not even maybe by Ellen's, but they just, how do you feel about Ellen's energy ride? Could you tell us? It's all those people's faults. Good job, guys.
But I will say, if they ever touch Mr. Toad, no amount of rationale will calm me down from that one.
Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. That is a ride that I really hope to enjoy one day before they take it out. Hopefully I can get to Disneyland very soon. So, but guys, like I said, please be sure to go check out Jessica at duchessdisneyland.com. There you'll find all her social links, Facebook and all, Twitter, all the good stuff. And of course, go download the podcast as Explorers and hear this Avengers group share and help you guys on your other Disney adventures you're going to be having one day. So, Jessica, thank you so much for joining me today. And to you, as well as to the Magic Share listeners, I say, I hope you have a great night, day, weekend. As always, stay magical. Now, before we do end today's show, I do want to personally thank you for taking the time out and listening to the show, listening to podcasts, and hopefully sharing it with your friends and family who enjoy Disney as much as you do. And I really hope this episode brought some Disney magic into your day. We talked a lot about Disneyland and the changes that are coming and changes that potentially may be coming in the future. And I'd love to get your feedback. I would love if you would please head over to talkaboutthemagic.com under this post. Of course, it'll be in the show notes, but under this post, and let me know what you think. Comment. You can tweet at me, you can Facebook me, or just comment underneath this post over on the site. What do you think about the changes that are coming? Are you excited? Do you feel like Disney is starting to become more of a theme park and losing maybe the heritage that came when they first started? I'd really love to get your ideas and your thoughts. Also, I want to let you guys know, if you are new to the show, well, actually, even if you're not new to the show, over on Instagram, I've started something that I think is a lot of fun, and I hope you guys will join me. It's called Daily Disney. And basically, it is exactly what it sounds like. Monday through Friday, I share a video on Instagram, and I basically kind of give an update regarding anything Disney, whether it's about the parks, movies, or anything news-wise, news-oriented, that is going to be happening. So it's a little bit of a different kind of feel, and I think, with how quick we are, in the sense of we want everything now and don't necessarily always want to read or watch a 13-minute video. I hope this will be that little fix you need, or just at least a little break from whatever it is you're doing that day to get some Disney magic in you. So just head over to Instagram. You can search Talk About the Magic there, and you'll find me. And like I said, Daily Disney, Monday through Friday. So again, guys, I really hope you enjoyed today's show, and I really appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to listen, to download, and to share. I hope you have a great night, day, weekend. Whenever you're listening to this, as always, stay magical.
This was the Talk About the Magic podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to rate, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay magical.